I could see some of your cases where motions to compel are going to cross every other day. You got depositions all over the place. Maybe you've got a trial coming up. When you're making this transition, and then you've got to, notify the clients, do the file transfers, do the uploads, do all the tech stack, get it all set up, and then move these things, all while you're maintaining the workflow and doing the cases.
Yeah, I think it was largely that we had clients who trusted us and who wanted to keep working with us, and we were able to just look. I think it was just a lot of logistics, right? I wish there was an easier way to do it, but there isn't. You do have to get all of the files. You have to make sure you have everything you need, and you have to have a place for it to live, right? So before you can start transitioning files, you have to figure out, well, where is this stuff going to live? Do we have a system? Do we have a filing system? Because you can't just take the client's files and not know where to put them, right?
Welcome to the Founding Partner Podcast. Join your host, Jonathan Hawkins, as we explore the fascinating stories of successful law firm founders. We'll uncover their beginnings, triumph over challenges, and practice growth. Whether you aspire to launch your own firm, have an entrepreneurial spirit, or are just curious about the legal business, you're in the right place. Let's dive in.
Welcome to Founding Partner Podcast. I'm your host, Jonathan Hawkins. This is a podcast where I get to interview founding attorneys and hear about their journeys and lessons they've learned along the way. Today's guest is Vivek Tata. He is I'll call it a high-end business, complex litigator, trial lawyer based in New York. His firm is Elsberg Baker Maruri. He is a founding partner and currently is the general counsel. And they in the fairly recent past, started this firm. I'm excited to get into it and to hear about what they're building and how it's been so far. So Vivek, welcome.
Thanks so much for having me.
All right, so your firm, I'll call it and you correct me where I'm wrong, but I'll call it a boutique, high-end, complex litigation firm. The firm's been already gotten 2025 Boutique of the Year, #1 best mid-sized firm to work for. That's pretty good. And you guys have only been around for maybe a couple years, maybe a little over that.
That's exactly right. Yeah, we opened in 2024, so we're a little over 2 years now, and it's just been a rocket ship so far.
Yeah, so tell us about your firm. What kind of cases do you guys do? And for the audience here, we have an audience of all types of law firms. It's very small to big, family law, plaintiffs, all this stuff. So why don't you explain exactly what you guys do?
Sure. So we're litigation owned. We don't have a transactional department, but within litigation, we do almost any civil litigation with a focus on commercial litigation. So we have a big, for example, Delaware practice, complex commercial contracts, trade secrets has been a big part of our practice. It really runs the gamut, and we practice, we'll practice anywhere in the country. Primarily, our cases have been in states like New York and Delaware, California, but really anywhere in the country. And it's been great starting out a firm and seeing how that goes.
Yes. So you're based in New York. Is that the only office you guys have?
Yeah, we're a one-office firm. That's right.
But trial lawyers will travel.
Exactly. That's right. You need your litigation bag, and then you're good to go.
So tell me about the cases. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, you do both sort of an hourly practice, but also a plaintiff contingency or success fee type practice.
Sure. So we do both sides of the V. We will take cases, and we like that. I think, although it's not a target that I've set, I think generally my practice has been 50% plaintiff, 50% defendant. And I really like that, and I think we all like that mix because, as I'm sure you from practicing, you get to see all angles of a case. Your strategies evolve if you think about things from the plaintiff side. You tend to be more aggressive even when you're on the defense side because you have that plaintiff side experience. So I think the practices feed into each other. And we'll take on, we're happy to do AFAs, contingency or other types of cases. A lot of our work is hourly.
So tell me, I'll call it business litigation, or that's just what I'll call it. I'm sure you do more than that. You maybe have key tam and whistleblower and antitrust, some other things probably. And some of those are more ripe for contingency than others. But, from a business litigation perspective, you got to be careful with the cases you take on contingency. So how do you guys think about that as you're considering whether to do it on contingency?
Yeah, I think for contingency or any sort of alternative arrangement, you need to know the capabilities of your firm really well. You need to have the experience, obviously, of having done cases like that. And I think it's really essential before taking on a case, especially if it's a complex case, to really dig into the materials before you propose any sort of arrangement. Because otherwise, you end up in a situation where either the client or the lawyer really regrets the arrangement. And so I think if you go into it with your eyes open, you can assess the case really well. You know what you're getting into. Obviously, there are surprises, but we found that as long as we do our diligence, we're happy, very happy with the results.
And collectability has got to be high on the list of what to think through. You don't necessarily have a big insurance company's pockets to dig into. So that, in a business, I don't know if you guys have encountered it, but you don't want to end up in a fraudulent transfer chase on the other end of a verdict, do you?
No, I think that's absolutely right. I mean, and that's something you always have to look at. And we have had situations, as I'm sure every firm has, where you're asked to take something on contingency and it actually looks like a slam dunk. But the problem is going to be that the defendant knows it's a slam dunk and they've taken the cash and run away with it. So, you obviously have to look for that when you're taking the case on.
So let's go back a little bit to your background. So we'll pick it up after law school. You started with, I'll call it the big firm, big law route, and then you pivoted from there. But why don't you take us back? As you were coming out of law school, did you know what you wanted to do? Did you always want to be a trial lawyer? What was your decision process?
Yeah, actually, and I had to go back a little bit even before graduating. So I went to law school. I'll go back. I learned a little bit. I worked in business for a little while before going to law school. I was in the tech industry. And I went to law school thinking probably primarily that I would be a transactional lawyer. I hadn't really thought through being a trial lawyer, in part just because I'd been in business. And so the lawyers you interact with tend to be on the transactional side. And in my first summer in law school, I had the opportunity to extern for a judge who was an extraordinary lawyer in his own right, and then, of course, became a federal judge and was a very well-regarded judge, very hardworking and rigorous. I mean, he really, even for interns, he was very tough on our drafts, made us better writers, made us better thinkers, and I loved that experience. And I suspect that any members of your audience who are lawyers, who are litigators and trial lawyers will appreciate the first time you walk into a courtroom as a lawyer or as a law student. If you have that feeling, like, I belong here, I want to do this, this is exciting, this is fun, that feeling doesn't go away. And certainly that was my experience. And in fact, watching lawyers argue, that feeling of, hey, I could do that, or I'd love to give that a shot, that has certainly not gone away. And it was that experience, I think, that really made me think, wait, I actually want to do litigation. Then my second summer, I was a law clerk for a big firm. I still took the option of doing a few transactional projects that summer, and very quickly, I would say almost on my first day, was like, yep, this is not for me. I'm not doing it. And I loved the litigation work that I did. And so that's really what made the decision for me. And then coming out of law school, I knew I wanted to go.
And then you went big firm route, but then did you pivot and go clerk for a judge?
Exactly. So I graduated from law school, worked only for a few months at a big firm, the same one I'd summered at, and I had a good experience. And then I went to clerk for a judge in the Eastern District who has been an incredible mentor. And that cemented the fact, the idea that I wanted to be not just a litigator, but one of my mentors called a courtroom lawyer, not a paper lawyer. Like, I wanted to be in court, I wanted to be arguing, I wanted to be in trial. And I knew that at a big firm, there was a risk that, although they deal with sophisticated matters, there's a lot of, summary judgment and settle. And I didn't really want that route. And I also wanted to make sure that I had the opportunity to build the experience I need to be a real trial lawyer. And so I did something, I think, that at that point was a little bit unconventional, that I think has become a lot more normal, which is to go to a boutique after my clerkship.
Yeah, I did a clerkship as well. And the thing that I really liked about it, it was sort of a good in-between from the law school theoretical side, sort of easing into litigation. So you saw the trial work, you saw the pleadings and the motions that came through. You didn't see all the discovery part, but you saw a good part of it. You started to get your feet wet, and then, on the other side, when you started to practice, I felt like I was ready for it a little bit more than maybe I would have been otherwise.
I think that's absolutely right. And I think also you see, if you're working for a good judge, and I work for a great judge, you see how hard the law can be. judges are, almost always lawyers who've done extremely well, who could do anything they wanted and have chosen to be in public service. And they work very hard. They're very diligent. They're thoughtful. And it's an important reminder, I think, that ultimately, we're a profession that really should value making sure that justice is done, and seeing judges day in and day out work really hard to achieve that result is, I think, important for me as a lawyer and to remind me, why I'm doing this in the first place.
And the other good thing is you see a lot of work product. You see a lot of different work product. You start to see the good stuff, the bad stuff, and then, for me, I'm thinking, all right, how is the clerk going to look at this? I want to make sure mine's pretty good when they see it. So that's another benefit, I think.
Oh, 100%. I think, and you learn one thing that I remember taking away from that experience is, yes, of course you want to be pithy and maybe a little snappy in your writing, but you also have to make sure that the person reading it knows what you're talking about. And you can't ever forget that the clerk has gone through, you're just case number 100 that's on their desk. And you can't assume that they remember all the acronyms and facts that you've memorized by the time you're writing this brief. And that's an important reminder, I think, is, that's something that I always come back to.
Okay, so then you left your clerkship to go to a litigation boutique. So take me through that thought process versus going back to the big firm. You're like, no, I'm going to go to a boutique.
Yeah, I think the easy thing would be to go to the big firm, and I'm not a hugely risk-taking person. That would have been sort of the normal career choice. But I saw very quickly in the clerkship that there are lawyers who are very comfortable in the court, and that comes from doing it. I think that's pretty clear. And there was an opportunity to join a boutique that was just getting off the ground in 2018. And I knew that if I went to a place like that, where they were just growing, they were building, they needed associates, they were going to give them experience, that I would have the opportunity to actually practice trial law at the highest level. And so I decided to sort of take that leap. And I don't think in retrospect that it was much of a risk, actually, because I think although lawyers tend to be risk averse, we sometimes forget that there's risk in inertia and not changing up and not taking risks. I mean, there's actually risk in just sort of letting your career drift along, and you actually want to be active and thinking about what is it that I need to do for my own experience so that I can be the best lawyer I can be.
I think that's so true. I think a lot of lawyers, I don't want to single them out, but particularly at big firm, you get comfortable and then you feel like it's too risky to leave, where I think sometimes it's too risky to stay. And particularly if you go to a smaller firm where you get a lot of experience quick, then you're building a skill set that you really can take anywhere. I mean, if you're at a firm where you've got a lot of frontline, real world experience, and a plane goes down and the entire firm is gone except for you, you've got a skill set that you can take somewhere else. Maybe do your own thing if you have to, but you've got it because you were there doing it.
That's absolutely right. And I think one thing that working at a boutique has taught me, first the one I started in 2018 and then our firm now, in both situations we started in early days, there wasn't much infrastructure, right? I think at both firms, the firm started, people worked from home. There wasn't an office or anything like that. But the great thing about computers and the internet and Westlaw is you don't need a lot. And to your point, if everything else were to go away, I think in the modern world, a lawyer with internet access and Microsoft Word can be extraordinarily effective. Although, of course, it's great to have resources. You don't always need them.
All right, so take me through. So as you're coming out of the clerkship, you've decided you want to go to a boutique. Did you make that decision first and then look for one, or did the opportunity arise and then you said, all right, yeah, I'm going to go this way? How did you find the job? It
was opportunistic. I wasn't specifically looking for a boutique, although I did try to keep in mind my mentor's advice, as I said, you want to be a trial lawyer, not a paper lawyer. And so I was a little bit skeptical of returning to I shouldn't say returning to a firm, but going to a big firm where I wasn't sure that I would get a lot of substantive experience. And so that was probably my primary criteria, but I didn't have my mind made up.
So you went to the boutique, you're getting your chops, you're learning how to try cases, manage clients, all the stuff. And then in 2024, the opportunity arose to go start a new firm, start your own firm. Tell me about the genesis of that. And just for context, it was you and was it 5 others? So you had
exactly.
6 total co-founders. Tell me about, maybe the overall sort of genesis, but then what was going through your mind?
It was an opportunity to work with people who I really respect and like working with. I mean, I enjoyed working with my old firm, but The folks that we started this firm with are, I think, some of the best lawyers I've ever worked with or against. They're the people that I really like to come in, when I come to work to see them. I think we get along really well, and we also practice law together really well. We complement each other's strengths, and I think if you can find a group like that, and I was lucky to find 5 people, I think it's unusual, but if you can find people like that, even if it's just one other person, the decision to work with them feels a lot less risky. Because as you said, you can just start a firm. Anybody can open a shingle. You go open a firm and hang up a shingle, right? So if you have 5 people and you think they're all great lawyers, then that's 5 times as strong.
And for you, was there ever any doubt? Yeah, I'm going to do this, or maybe I don't want to do this.
I mean, maybe a little bit. I actually think, and this is, your gut tells you it's the right choice, right? If you have this opportunity, you say, you know what, I want to do it. And there's a common saying, if you get offered a seat on a rocket ship, take it, right? You don't sort of second guess these opportunities, because these opportunities don't come along every day. And so it was sort of do it now or don't do it.
That's right. And you're right. It is, I think, starting a firm is easy. All you need is a computer, an internet connection, and a bar license.
Right. I do with some clients too.
Well, yeah. That's a different story. That's more than starting a firm. Yeah, definitely you want those. And to survive, you're going to need them for sure. But yeah, I mean, anybody could just say, hey, I'm a firm now. And so I assume when you guys started, I assume you had a bulk of, ongoing active cases that probably transitioned with you.
We did, and that was it was a real ride, because you've got cases and it's got to be seamless. I mean, your clients can't experience a disruption at all, and I don't think any of our clients did, very fortunately. But it's you've got to be, especially when you're starting the firm and we didn't have associates at that point. I mean, we were doing everything ourselves, and it was actually a great experience, and it confirmed that we were doing the right thing.
Yeah. So tell me, so it was the 6 of you partners, no
Yep.
associates. What about staff? Who came with you, and who was there in the beginning?
Well, we had folks join us, and we had a non-lawyer CEO who is someone who has been extraordinarily valuable. And I think for firms that, once you get to a certain point, I strongly recommend considering something like that, like a COO or CEO, because it allows the lawyers to focus on what they're good at, which is law, and maybe takes them off of doing things where a legal background is not actually that helpful and is not, client focused or business building. So the operations of a firm. And as you grow, that obviously can be quite significant. And so to have someone who is dedicated, who knows what they're doing, who knows the legal space, but even if they're not a lawyer, has been extraordinarily helpful. And I think allowed us to scale a lot more quickly than we would have if the lawyers had been splitting their time between, doing the actual legal work, serving clients, working on getting new business, but then also having to manage the internal dynamics of a firm.
Yeah, that stuff, I'll just say, is a pain in the ass.
Yeah.
So, I think more and more firms are bringing in, I'll call it the C-suite, non-lawyer C-suite type people, but it's still not as common as you would expect. And a lot of lawyers push back on that, and they're like, we're not bringing in a non-lawyer to run this place. What was the thought process behind you guys coming in, starting off the bat with a non-lawyer CEO, and then importantly, how did you find the person? Because that's the other thing. Sometimes people say, I want one, and then you look around and it's really hard to find that person.
Well, we were fortunate enough to have worked with our CEO Josette before at our old firm, and so we knew she was capable, and I think we were very lucky. And I do think you need to find the right person, of course, because law is obviously a very client-driven business. You need to retain your focus on the client, and having folks who are doing other activities at the firm, and the partners need to be aware of what's happening, and that can be hard. So it has to be someone you trust, someone that you can feel comfortable delegating to, and knowing that they're managing the firm, as well or probably better than you could, given their background and their experience.
I want to talk about some of the logistics too, because I suspect, just from talking to you, looking at your website, knowing enough about the industry, that you guys have some really sophisticated, meaty, intense cases going on, like that are probably in all different stages. I could see some of your cases where motions to compel are going to cross every other day. You got depositions all over the place. Maybe you've got a trial coming up.
Mm-hmm.
When you're making this transition, and then you've got to, notify the clients, do the file transfers, do the uploads, do all the tech stack. get it all set up, and then move these things all while you're maintaining the workflow and doing the cases. How did you guys make that work? Because it's easier said than done, for sure.
Yeah, I think it was largely that we had clients who trusted us and who wanted to keep working with us. And, we were able to look, I think it was just a lot of logistics, frankly. I wish there was an easier way to do it, but there isn't. You do have to get all of the files. You have to make sure you have everything you need. And you have to have a place for it to live, right? So before you can start transitioning files, you have to figure out, well, where is this stuff going to live? Do we have a system? Do we have a filing system? Because you can't just take a client's files and, not know where to put them, right? So a lot of things, it's like building an airplane while you're flying, right? You have to make sure that you have the infrastructure essentially immediately as the client transitions, because otherwise the client's going to feel some disruption. And yeah, I remember basically, I think it was probably a few nights after we started the new firm, I was up late filing in one of our cases, and we didn't have any infrastructure. I was doing it myself, and trying to make sure we got all the exhibits in and everything else before midnight. And I'm sure you've been there. I know probably every lawyer, every litigator has, certainly, but you have to do it for the client.
And that's the other part. You go from a place where you have all the support to a place where you are the support. Back in your business background, were you at sort of established business, or were you in startup type places?
No, I was at Google, so I was at a very established,
Okay.
big place. And that's one of the things that actually made this an interesting jump for me, is that having come from a business background where I was in an established company, going to law school, and then deciding actually I wanted to do something that's more startup-like. It's an interesting transition.
So it's 6 of you come over. You've got your CEO, maybe some other staff, and then I think you've got what do you have, 20 lawyers now or so?
We're actually at 30, or maybe a little bit above. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. So that's big growth. So basically 2 years, you went from 6 to 30.
Yeah.
That's a lot.
It has been. It's been really gratifying. And it goes to something I was saying earlier, which is, I think back even when I graduated, so 2016, it was not as common for folks to come out of law school, go to a boutique. Certainly happened, but it wasn't the norm. I think, especially in litigation, certainly in New York, that's changed. I think it is much more of an acceptable, well-trod path. I think people realize coming out of school that they can get great experience at boutiques. And we've been very fortunate to get just incredible associates to come with us.
So let's talk about that. You have five times growth, at least in terms of attorney headcount, in 2 years. That is a lot of interviews, a lot of recruiting. How do you find the people and then get them in, onboard them, get the culture right? How did you guys work that angle?
Yeah, some of it's infrastructure. We have staff that we have an incredible, recruiting and HR department. They are essential to what we do. We do law recruiting, law school recruiting. So we're on campus, and it's a lot of work, and you have a lot of interviews. But part of it is getting your name out there. And then I think also, if you can offer your associates a good experience, they know other good people, right? It's like anything else. Good people know good people, and I've always found that the best indicator of someone's ability as an associate is, the people they've worked with before.
And I have seen too, personally, and just knowing a lot of lawyers over the years, that once you reach a critical mass, it just sort of feeds on itself. It's easier to recruit, and people are knocking on your door versus you trying to find them. So you probably now are getting resumes. You're probably getting resumes from all the district judges, right? That are just...
Yeah, absolutely. And we try to make sure that they know we're recruiting, and then it becomes really hard to, find the right fit.
Yeah, that is the key. Real quick, if you haven't gotten a copy yet, please check out my book, The Law Firm Lifecycle. It's written for law firm owners and those who plan to be owners. In the book, I discuss various issues that come up as a law firm progresses through the stages of its growth, from just before starting a firm to when it comes to an end. The Law Firm Lifecycle is available on Amazon. Now back to the show. So let's talk about that. So 5 times growth in 2 years. How do you maintain, I'm sure you guys have a certain culture you want to maintain. How do you work to maintain that with the massive growth?
It's not easy. I think that's actually probably the biggest challenge, and will always be our biggest challenge, because I firmly believe that people are at the core of what a law firm is. And I think you just have to keep reinforcing it. We pride ourselves on being trial lawyers. We want to give people experience. We want to hold everybody to a high standard, and we want people to hold themselves to a high standard. And when you do that and you know that you can rely on the people that you're working with, whether or not they're senior to you or junior to you, it doesn't matter. If you can really inculcate a team environment where everyone feels like, just like a team sport, right? Everybody's on the team, everybody has a role to play. I think, first of all, that's critical for doing good client work, right? In trial practice, you have to run things that way. But I also think you just have to keep reinforcing it. Trial after trial, day after day, the way you treat people, I think you just have to keep doing it. And hopefully those people will then attract other people like that.
And so you mentioned when you first started, you didn't have an office, you're hybrid. What's the work now? Is it hybrid? Is it in office? How do you guys work that?
Yeah, I think most people tend to come into the office more often than not. We trust our lawyers to do that. And I think most people actually do come in. And I think it's, especially in a trial practice, it's really important. We've got depositions going on in a couple of cases, and trials coming up. And I think when you're all in the same room, when you're up in and out of each other's offices, I'm notorious for just sort of walking around the halls and popping into people's offices. I don't know if they like it or not, but it is, I do that because I do think there's a difference when, versus being on the screen. I mean, I was practicing during COVID, I'm sure you were, and it's very different when you're working with someone, you've never met them, you're just sort of interacting through a screen. It feels really impersonal, and it feels sometimes like you're just sending work across and then getting markups back. That's not fun. It doesn't feel like you're building something together. I think if you're strategizing together, you're working together, you're popping into each other's offices when you have a great idea. Certainly I know as an associate, those are the moments I remember, and I have to assume that's how our associates feel. I have very, very strong memories of actually working with David Elsberg, who was one of our named partners when I was an associate and he was a partner at our old firm, and working with him late at night, just batting ideas around. How are we going to attack this argument? How are we going to make this argument? How do we deconstruct this contract? And I still remember that vividly. And I think that's what brings people back and makes people really want to contribute to a firm.
Wholeheartedly agree. And it's the, especially, you mentioned when you were an associate being there, you may not be at this firm if you had been remote, because you wouldn't have developed the relationship. And I think and maybe it's changed, but there was a while there that a bunch of associates said, hey, you should let us be remote. I'm okay with hybrid, I think, but fully remote, I just think it's, number one, it's a disservice, I think, to the clients, but really it's a disservice to the attorney's own career. I still get referrals from attorneys I worked with 2 firms ago where we went to lunch 3 days a week, and if I was remote, it wouldn't be happening, And so I think I'm not sure associates are pushing back on that as much anymore, but I really think there's so many benefits of being in the office versus out that it should just be a no-brainer.
I think that's right. I totally agree. And you mentioned going to lunch with folks that you worked with a couple of firms ago. I've told associates this, and it's certainly true for me, that some of the strongest professional relationships that you'll build as a lawyer are the folks that you work with in your first few years, because you're all sort of in it together, good or bad. And you're all commiserating, or you're all sort of celebrating together, and you celebrate each other's victories. Someone gets an opportunity to do something they've written a great brief, they've done a deposition, you congratulate them. Or, something goes out something happy happens in their personal life. Those are the relationships that I think you maintain for years and years.
So let's talk a little bit. I want to talk a little bit about the vision of the firm. The 6 of you said, hey, we like working with each other. We want to create a boutique trial firm. You've done that, and you are doing that. So again, 6 to 30, that's quite an accomplishment in such a short period of time. As you look forward, what are you trying to build? Have you already built it, or is there more to build? Is it, hey, we're going to stay in New York, maybe we'll look at other offices? As you look to the future, what sorts of things do you want to accomplish that you haven't yet?
At least personally, and I think all our partners may have different views on this, but personally, I try not to be too wedded to a future plan. And the reason is because a firm is its people. And so any plan, I think, has to start with, are we hiring the absolute best people we really like to work with? I think if you go down the road of if you're trying to expand or you're trying to hit a numerical target, we want, 60 lawyers, or we want to have offices in 3 jurisdictions, whatever it is, those may be worthy goals, but I don't think you can accomplish them in a good way unless you're only doing it because you can find the right people to be in those roles. So I'd rather start with people and then let it grow organically than start with a goal and then try to have to find people to fit that growth.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. The other piece is you got to have the work.
100%. Oh, 100%. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And I mean, that drives a lot of it too. I mean, I imagine if all of a sudden you guys had tons of cases based out of California, you're like, all right, maybe we need a California office because we're just there all the time. But, so I get it. Yeah, the people drive it, the clients drive it. I think I agree with you. You shouldn't be wed to just a growth for growth's sake kind of goal. And so I assume that your growth from the 6 to 30 has been work driven. Probably you just need people, or is it a mix of both? Build it.
No, it absolutely has been. I mean, it's been we needed, and we knew when we started that we were going to be. We certainly knew we were going to be 6 people. I think we had we knew we had the work. We were very fortunate to have had work to staff, and maybe more work than felt comfortable at times. And that's when you staff up and you find the best people you can, and we've been really lucky. Going forward, I think it'll probably be more of the same. I don't know that we'll have the same growth rate, right? We have a critical mass now. I think we feel like we can take on basically any case of certain cases that we want to take on. We're big enough that we can do it. And so now it's somewhat more opportunistic, although we're always looking for great people.
Yeah. All right, so the 6 of you come over, you divide roles. You're general counsel for the firm. Have you been general counsel from the beginning, or is that something that popped in your lap later?
No, it's from the beginning. We all sort of everyone has to do something, right? It's a small firm. Sometimes people wear multiple hats, but I'm the GC.
And so tell me, what does that entail for you? What sorts of things come up in that role?
A lot of it is just maintaining process and procedure, right? You need to have a conflict system. You need to make sure that you are maintaining, what your key contracts are. Someone has to read contracts that the firm is signing, right? Make sure hiring process is appropriate. All the stuff that any business has to do, right? Just in a smaller version of that. And I'm sure I know you know this. And doing it alongside an active practice is where I think the challenge comes in. Yeah,
that is the challenge. In any law firm where the lawyers are serving in various leadership or operational or administrative roles, I mean, you just get pulled every which way. So it definitely need to spread it out for sure. So that's good. So I want to pivot a little bit. Your firm's a boutique. Your last firm was a boutique. I want to just hear your thoughts on, way back when boutiques were pretty rare. They are becoming more common now. For people out there that are thinking about what kind of firm do I want to go to, what kind of firm do I want to build, what are your general thoughts on more of a broad practice versus we're gonna niche?
I think so. We tend to we think of ourselves as generalists, and that's I think because we like having the mix. So of course, a lot of it has to do with what you like. I've always liked the fact that in litigation, every case is different. I'm constantly learning about new things, and that's actually part of what I like doing. Of course, there are people who I think have more niche practices, and I think if you will be fulfilled by that career for a long time, then that's great. And I think there's a great market. I mean, of course, IP, for example, there's a great market for that type of service for antitrust. Like there are these niche firms that do really well, but you have to know that that's going to be the lane you're living in for a long time. I think it can be harder to pivot once you've established yourself in that lane.
And so you got I'll say a general practice for litigation, but it's sort of we're calling it boutique, but a niche firm. You don't have corporate, you don't have real estate. Why did you guys decide, hey, we're not gonna try to bolt that on, or we're gonna stay in our litigation lane?
So there are probably two primary reasons. The first is it's the people that we knew, right? I mean, as I said, firms, people, we started out with litigators who were a litigation firm. I think that's part of it. A big part of it is also just this is our core competency. I mean, we have to go out and sort of make an active decision. Do we want to add a corporate department? What would that look like? Who would it be? Then you add a whole bunch of conflicts, right? As a litigator, one of the great things, particularly in New York, you have a lot of financial institutions and other sophisticated clients. One of the things that we can offer our clients is that we tend to be conflict free because we don't have a big corporate department. And that's, not just technical conflicts, but also positional conflicts. You don't have to, you don't have clients who are doing a certain type of deal and then on the litigation side deciding, well, can I attack that kind of deal, or is that going to make some of my clients upset? And we don't have that issue.
Yeah, it's a great point on the conflicts. I wonder, I have found it, I've seen it, also just on business development, getting clients. If if you have the corporate department, then all the corporate lawyers all over the country and in town are going to be more reluctant to send you a litigation matter, I would think.
Oh, that's absolutely right. I think that's absolutely right. I think it makes the conversation around referrals a lot easier. We pride ourselves on sort of playing well in the sandbox. We don't have a corporate department that's going to try to edge out your corporate department, anything like that.
So let's talk about business development marketing. We can talk about you individually or your firm or both. How do you get your clients? How do you get your cases?
It's a mix of referrals, prior relationships, and just going out and meeting people. I think I would say what I imagine is the standard mix. Of course, we don't have the corporate department that referring work internally, but otherwise, we have a good network of folks we've either been against or litigated with. And I'm always gratified when someone that we've litigated against refers us work, which does happen. And of course, we also just have networks in the city. But it's something you're always working on, right? I think every lawyer knows you can't just rest under your laurels. You got to keep getting out there and just building your practice.
Have you gotten by in a former opposing party yet? Not a referral from opposing counsel, but the opposing party hired you. Have you been there yet?
Yeah, it's certainly that's something that has happened, and it's really gratifying, right? And that's something that you can do to show people. It's one of the rewards for good work, right? Is that people see it and they go, oh yeah, next time I want that guy. And yeah, as I said, and also having opposing counsel do that too is a mark of respect, right? When you are up against someone and you think they're a good enough lawyer that you would entrust a client, you have to them, you can't take on a matter for whatever reason, I think is really one of the highest marks of respect you can pay another lawyer.
Yeah, that's cool. So how do you balance? I'm sure you are super busy doing the work, and you've got a young son and a family. You got that. You're general counsel. You're doing all the stuff. How do you balance that with, all right, I got to continually get out there to do the relationship development, business development?
I think it's impossible to ever have a perfect balance. I think there are weeks that go by where the family is maybe the thing that I'm spending a bit more time on because work is a little bit quiet, and then there are weeks where I'm in the office every night and I'm staying there until work gets done. And I don't want to say I've given up on, but I don't think that it is practical to worry too much about, am I striking a balance on a daily basis? Because I just don't think you can do it.
Yeah. All right, I'm pivot again. So I was a partner at 2 firms before I started my own firm. And it's way different from becoming a partner in an established firm to starting your own firm, for me at least. Just, even the ownership mentality is slightly different. I mean, maybe not even slightly, but it's very different. My last firm, I was a partner, so I technically was an owner, but it didn't quite feel like my baby. But when I was, founding this firm, it completely changed. What's been your experience being on the other side now of actually founding this firm and growing it?
Certainly the ownership feeling is there, although I really I want everyone to feel like they have a role in building the firm, right? Including the most junior associate, staff, everybody, I think, because when you're starting a business, everybody should feel like they are part of building it. But certainly as a founding partner, yeah, that's absolutely part of it. I'm very happy to come to work and know that this is the place that I help build.
Are there any mindset shifts, anything that that are different now that you're on the other side?
I think the focus on are we doing what's right for the future, right? I think you always want to have that future view, but I think certainly when you are talking about your own business, you're invested for the long term. And I think it's actually a privilege. You have a long-term perspective, right? It's great to be able to think that way. I mean, it can add stress and pressure because you have to think not just, what happens in the next 6 months, but what are the next 10 years look like? How are we going to grow? The questions you were asking before, what makes sense strategically for the business? Because there are decisions that you might make that in the short term, are hard or difficult or take a lot of money or time, but that you believe will help your business in the next 5-10 years. And if you're, a founding partner, and that's something you have to deal with for every decision. It can't just be short term. It's good for the bottom line in the next 3 months, so let's do it. You have to take a longer view.
I think that there's a lot of truth in that. When you are founding a firm, you're not founding a firm to shut it down in 5 years. It's like you're founding something that you want to last for, the runway is pretty long. And I think that's what makes it exciting for all the people that are joining you They know there's going to be a lot of runway versus firms that have been around a long time. You get into these weird dynamics where you have the partners that are on the verge of retirement versus the brand new ones, and these differing views of what we should do. Should we invest for the future or just pay now and shut it down? It's a very different view, and I think that long-term view is exciting. It's exciting for me. I'm sure it's exciting for you.
Absolutely, and it's one of the things that we want to promise our associates, is that we want to give everyone the opportunity to try to build their career here, right? And if not here, then at least you gain skills and you learn about the law, and you hopefully have a good time, being a lawyer. But you might have the opportunity to be here for a long time. We want to make sure that opportunity exists. And I think it's harder to do that, as you say, at a firm that's really established, where there are institutional pressures and maybe not to grow or to not promote.
So sitting here today, now that you've been on this growth trajectory of a couple years, any advice for folks out there that may be thinking about, maybe I want to venture out and start a firm, but they're maybe a little unsure, maybe they have some of this risk aversion? What advice would you give them?
There's no perfect time. At least I can't think of what that perfect time would be. I think if it's something that people want to do, that's a pretty good sign that you should give it real thought. I think obviously being cognizant of the risks, thinking about having a plan, right? So going into it thinking, right, here's how I'm going to generate my first couple of clients, right? I've got the network, I've got the people. I don't think you can go into it, or I think it's more difficult to go into it and then try to do those things, right? So as I was saying, you don't want to do too much of building the plane while it's in the air. Any groundwork you can lay beforehand is worthwhile, and it's worth even just taking those investigatory steps and thinking through, okay, so what would that look like? Am I going to have an office? Am I not going to have an office? Will I partner up with somebody else, or will I do it myself? Am I going to hire staff, and when will I hire staff? What do I need to be a lawyer? What do I not need? What's a nice to have? What's a must have? Going through that checklist, going through that process, I think will make it real for people. And by going through it, I think they'll decide whether or not it's something they actually want to do.
All right, so I like to ask sometimes the inversion question. So is there anything that you've done in the first 2 years that you wish maybe we should not have done that, or maybe that you eventually did and you said maybe we should have done that from the beginning?
I think we trended in the right direction on this, but certainly trusting professionals, non-lawyer professionals, to do their job I think it's one of the best decisions we made. And I think, the earlier you do it, the better, right? I have two of my partners focus on recruiting. They do a great job, but having a recruiting person in-house has been great. As you know, we've grown really fast, and we couldn't do it without having, folks who can focus their time on those activities. I think that's really, really important. I think the other thing is absolutely thinking about business development and how you're going to grow client base, but also thinking very carefully about people. I think the hardest thing I thought would be business development, and I'm gratified to say that it has not been. The thing that has actually been hardest, and I think we've done a great job at this, but it has been very hard, is maintaining that quality bar, getting people in who are really excellent. Because you have a lot of applicants, you have a lot of people who want to move, but you have to make sure that the fit is right. And so I think focusing on that early is really important if you're trying to build a firm that's bigger.
I think that is so true. I've had the exact same experience. I think some people out there may disagree, but I think it's easier to get clients than it is to get the right people in your firm. That's the hardest part. And so I tell people, it's sort of become my mantra, always be recruiting. So you just always treat recruiting like business development. You just always want to have your eye out for that person. You're like, that person would be great to work with or whatever. Because the timing is never perfect when you first meet them. But if you stay in touch, you're building the relationship. When the time comes, you want them to think of your firm, at least be on the list. The worst thing is when you bump into somebody that you really liked, you hadn't seen them in a year and they've moved and you're like, why didn't you call me?
Yeah.
Like,
absolutely. Yeah. You want to make sure that people know that you're looking and that you have available. And sometimes even if you're not, that superstar is going to come to you because they know you, or you, as you say, working at getting.
And that's the other thing. If I have found too, if you find the superstar and they are making a move, you will find a space. You should find a space for that person.
I think that's absolutely right.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, cool, man. This has been fun. Anything we haven't talked about? Let me ask this: Are you an entrepreneur at heart? I know you were in business before. Is this very different, or just if you look back in your life, this was sort of a natural thing that was probably going to happen?
No, I don't think I am one of those people. I think, I know that there are folks who go out and start their own firm, and they were going to do that from day one. And I know people like that in law school, right? I could have told them in first year, you're going to go out and start your own firm. It's going to be a smashing success here because you would just have that, mentality. I don't think I am that person. And I think the great thing about starting a firm has been that you don't need necessarily to have that constant itch of wanting to start something. As long as you find the right people and it makes sense as a business. The great thing about law is that once you're trying cases, once you've got your binders and you're busy, you're working, it stops feeling like a startup very quickly. I can't remember the last time that I thought, my goodness, we're so new. I feel like I've been doing this at this firm for years now, and it's been 2 years. Because once you're in the cases, once you're looking at documents and writing briefs, all that goes away.
Yeah. Well, Vivek, man, this has been fun. Thanks for coming on. I'm glad we got introduced. I'm really impressed with what you guys have built already and are building, and excited to see the continued growth, whatever that means for you guys. If somebody wants to get in touch with you, maybe they're interested in learning from you, or maybe applying for a job or sending you a case, what's the best way?
Just shoot me an email. It's on the website, vtata@elsberglaw.com. Always happy to hear from folks. And this has been really wonderful. Thanks so much for having me on. It's been great.
Awesome. Well, stay tuned, folks. We'll see where they are, see if they're growing more. It's another 5 times in 2 years, or not.
Thanks so much, Jonathan.
All right, see ya.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Founding Partner Podcast. Be sure to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts to stay up to date on the latest episodes. You can also connect with Jonathan on LinkedIn and check out the show notes with links to resources mentioned throughout our discussion by visiting www.lawfirmgc.com. We'll see you next time for more origin stories and insights from successful law firm founders.